really happy to have you here with me for this very, very exciting topic. We've had record numbers for the registration for the webinar, a lot of interest around this topic because many companies think about a mobile channel for their employee communication, but besides some other issues like how do we onboard users, data security, what do we do with the app, one of the topics that's coming up pretty much every time we talk with customers and prospective customers is how does it fit to our existing environment? How does it fit to our intranet? How should we put this into our workplace strategy and into the other channels that we have today for internal communication? And that's something we want to talk about today. And before I do that, a short overview about Staffbase. Staffbase is an employee communications platform with a great focus on mobile, but also a built-in content management system and also a great way to see all the content on your desktop. How Staffbase fits into that is something what we want to talk about today in more detail. If you want to learn more about the platform, about our worldwide customers, feel free to contact us. We are happy to run you through a live demo of the platform. But now let's jump into the topic. And before I do that, I think it's one important point to talk about digital workplace and intranets, because we are talking about intranets for a very long time now. And for the last 2 or 3 years, there's a new term coming up with the digital workplace. And it's pretty important to really define how they both relate together, right? The digital workplace is pretty much defined as the whole environment of digital tools provided by an organization for their employees and allows them to do their job. So that's I think a pretty easy definition. And the intranet itself is a part of this. And the intranet itself also is changing the role more and more. Some couple of years ago, intranet was a big thing, a big platform trying to do everything. And now we see a clear trend that the intranet is more and more the front door into this digital workplace. So both are related. Intranet is a part of it, but we see many organizations today not doing an intranet strategy anymore. It's more a lot broader view and really doing a digital workplace strategy. And a part of the strategy is really thinking about what's exactly the intranet and how do we deal with all that. And that's exactly also the stuff we want to talk about today in some more detail. Why does the digital workplace matter? I think for many of you, that's a question that's not really in question. You all know that technology is an important part of our lives today, and especially talking about employee experience. So the whole number of touch points that employees have with their workplace is really important on how they are motivated, informed, engaged with what they do. So employee experience really matters. And technology, besides other factors like cultural or the physical space, is a really important part in that. And even more than technologies takes a big part in our personal lives. There's been a lot of development around this. And so I think the workplace is a topic that many companies have on top of their agenda today and really try to think about how to best deal with that. So I got one comment here that the audio doesn't appear to work. Short question to other participants. Can you guys hear me? Okay, so I hope to see you can hear. Okay, so for the ones that can't hear me, I hope you can fix the problem. It appears to be on your side, so sorry for that. Maybe one comment at this point, I didn't make this in the beginning. Everything that I show you here in terms of the slides and also the recording of this webinar will be provided to you guys later on. And maybe Sina, we could also write this in the chat for the ones that didn't hear me now. Okay, so that's why it matters. And what I'd like to do today is do pretty much two things with you. First, let's have a look at the requirements of the digital workplace, and how you can define them and how you can really set up a strategy for a company. And the second part is, let's look at the technology. How can we set up technology that it best fits the needs of the organization, and especially the question, how does an employee app fits into the whole picture? So we will walk through these two parts and start right away with part one, requirements of a digital workplace. If you think about this, you can do user group meetings, you can do a lot of surveys in organization. You will at the end come up with a picture pretty close to this one. And this is really, you can look around how other organizations are doing this. They all come up at the end with some sort of processes where they say, we have a communication part, which is all sorts of information that's time critical. We have a knowledge part, which is also information related, but it's a lot more about structured knowledge. Findability is a big topic there. You have a collaboration part, which a lot revolves around teamwork, working in projects together. And there's a process part, which pretty much covers processes like enterprise resource planning, HR processes, and CRM processes. So that's pretty much a big view on the digital workplace, on the major, let's say, use cases. And it's now possible to also break this down into a lot more detail. And we've done this here with an example for the four use cases. What you see here, we have sub use cases for communication. For instance, we have communication one-to-many or few-to-many. We have peer-to-peer communication, and we also have the very important feedback channel. So more not top-down, but bottom-up. And the feedback could be things like a pulse survey, like audience-specific surveys, feedback on products, and so on. So what you see here is a really holistic picture of use cases in real detail that all need to be covered typically by a digital workplace. And of course, this will be very specific for each individual company, but I think that's is a good starting point if you try and if you start to develop this for your own organization in a way. That's a great first step. And maybe one interesting thought at this point. It's about shifting priorities of these processes, because what we see in the past, all the organizations that they were called modern organizations had labor division as a key source for competitiveness. We currently are more in a phase of postmodern organization, where knowledge is a really important source of competitiveness. We have knowledge management, we have the wikis, we have experts that connect across organizations. So it's a lot of thinking around this one, and we see a new type of organizations emerging, right? Organizations like these tech companies like Amazon, Google, Tesla, who are moving at a really high speed with innovations, even if they are really large organizations. So they move with a high speed of innovation. They are really good at learning, at trying things, at failing, getting up and doing it better again and again. So their source of competitiveness is not knowledge alone anymore. It's a lot more around managing change. And that's where many organizations go to. And if you match these types of organizations with these processes that are just laid out here, you see that in the beginning, processes and knowledge were really important parts. Now, for knowledge organizations, it was a lot around knowledge repositories, about collaboration environments. And now if we go into the hypermodern organizations, where speed and managing change is the key strategic source of competitiveness, collaboration is still really important, but communication really enters the field, because if you move at this speed as a large organization, you need to be able to explain things to your employees, to explain why you do what you do. You need to take them with you. And also you need to learn from employees, from the front line, how things work, where things are failing, where you need to adjust, right? So that's why in many intranets before, communication was one part of it, or digital workplaces, it was a part of it. It was like company news, but it was not really important. And we see this definitely change. And I think if you are in some sort of communications, an internal communications function, that's really great news for you because you get a lot more into a strategic position at companies. And we see this happening a lot, especially at our customers. So we talked about change, and there are other factors too that push communication a lot forward. So one is the generations, millennials entering the workforce, and now are the largest group in the labor force. Engagement is a big topic. You all know these low engagement numbers that are coming out of these surveys from Gallup and others year after year. And we have a huge topic around deskless employees. More than 70% of employees do not work at a desk. They don't have access to communication channels today, no email, no intranet or any other digital channel. So you have new challenges that meet limited channels. And that's why digital communication is getting so important. So again, coming back to this picture, that's an overview of use cases for the digital workplace, and that's part one of the requirements. What happens now is something that many organizations really forget as part of their digital workplace strategy. It's a look at the main target groups. So who actually within the company will use this digital workplace, and what are their kind of work types that are. Knowledge workers are typically always seen as the major users of a digital workplace, and many current digital workplaces are really defined and designed for knowledge workers around project management, communities, and so on. But we see in many companies that a lot of workers are not knowledge workers. They are process workers, still sitting at a desk, but doing things like accounting, HR operation, purchasing, and so on. They are not working a lot in projects in collaboration. So they have a lot more day-to-day routines. And you have the huge field of non-desk workers who are not sitting at a desk, no access. And in many, many companies, and of course, many of our customers have a lot of non-desk workers, they are the majority of the workforce, right? Until now, in a typical digital workplace strategy, they would not be part of it. They are neglected. They are just not there, right? We see this is changing a lot because everyone has a mobile device now. It's possible to reach them, and that's why it's one of the key requirements that enters the stage. And of course, you could also add temporary workers, external partners, or other user groups to this. And even if you are a hospital, you would probably don't name them knowledge workers. You would maybe have your medical staff, you would have your back office staff, and you have nurses, for instance, right? It's all about thinking about target groups and really counting numbers here and understand how many of them are really in my company and how can I best set up the whole digital workplace to really make this useful for everyone there. So once you have that, you can bring both together. Now we can say, hey, we have the processes like communication, knowledge, processes, and collaboration, and we can match them with the target group. And you see that in most organizations, non-desk workers will not play a big role in these collaborations. They are not working in projects, team rooms, sharing documents and stuff, but they will be still want to get all the communication. They will have some knowledge parts where they want to have a phone list, the safety guideline, the employee handbook is something they want to see. And for the processes, they want to manage vacations, pay stub, and other employee self-services there as well. So this is a really, really important view you should have as part of your project. And you can even break this further down. And this just as an example for each of your worker types, you can really write down what are the use cases that this kind of worker really needs to have access to. And you see, even for a non-desk worker, that's a surprising number of use cases. And if you think about an employee app, it means it's not just a news app with some corporate news in there. There's a lot more of content that you can have in an employee app that really needs to reach uh, non-desk workers, right? So that as a first part, and if you bring all this together, here we have a first part of a digital workplace strategy. This means the use cases, how they match to your target groups within the company, and the third part that you can also do now, and you should do, is think about the timing here, because typically you won't have this ready from day one, but there will be a step-by-step approach. So this means you will be able to kind of set up a roadmap and say, we see in many cases companies start off with communication because it's a burning platform for them, and then they come in and update some processes, work on collaboration and so on. So that's a great way to go. And it's a big change that we see from a couple of years ago where companies try to have the one big project with the one big launch that's doing everything from the beginning, and led to exhausted project teams that after 2 years of just planning, designing things, didn't have any resources left to really get this live and improve it once it is live, right? So this is, as you see, a pretty easy approach to have a great and personalized digital workplace strategy in place, also develop a roadmap. And this is now a good basis to think and talk about how we can use technology to actually support that, right? So requirements are defined. Now, what's the best technology set up to meet these needs? Before we look at the setup, let's talk a bit about some truths, some insights about selecting technology. First one is there's a long discussion going on for many, many years now about should you use a single platform for the digital workplace or for your intranet before, or should you go with a best of breed approach where you take the best tools for individual use cases and combine them together, right? It was always a pretty open discussion, but this has changed lately because with all the cloud tools that are now available, we see that these special tools provide a better user experience than the single platforms before. They provide a better strategy for bring your own device approaches because you can pick out some of these individual tools and really make them available for bring your own device and personal devices in that sense. You are a lot more flexible in the mid and long term, so you can set this up pretty quick and change some of these tools as you go and update and really work on a roadmap instead of the big one platform. And one thing that many companies have been suffering for many years now, it means less shadow IT, because with single platforms, you typically were in a position where you would disappoint many, many users and departments with really bad usability for many use cases, and they would go out and purchase IT by themselves. And you would end up with a lot of shadow IT in the company, nobody really using your one big platform. And that's a real painful thing in the last couple of years. One famous example that this change is also happening for the large and major vendor in the space is Microsoft. Microsoft 5 or 10 years ago, Microsoft would be the prime example for a single platform. So you would put a SharePoint in the middle of the digital workplace, would hire an agency and consultants and developers that would spend 1 year to build a huge individual platform out of this. And at the end, you would have many users who wouldn't like and wouldn't want to use it. Microsoft completely changed their strategy here, and they said, we go cloud first, and this means all these services like SharePoint, Yammer, Microsoft Teams, and so on are today cloud first services that they clearly define as best of breed approach to the digital workplace. So that's really happening, and that's something to keep in mind for your own technology decisions. Second, technology truth is there's an old and a new approach on how you actually select technology. The old approach, what was that you would see, what do we have? What's the term, the tech strategy? So you would say we are a Microsoft shop. If you want to do something, we first see what Microsoft is doing, and if that's good enough, we pick it, or else we look elsewhere. And then you would say, what are the tools that can cover the use case, and which use cases need to be integrated. This is still some sort of true, but in a new approach, there are other factors coming in that are even more important. First one is great employee experience. If it's not a great experience, and if it doesn't work really well, also in terms of accessibility, it means departments, users will turn to other solutions. You will still end up with shadow IT. Second one is that's really important is about which of the use cases are available and need to be available for personal devices, and which needs to be available for at least company mobile devices. And as we will see, these questions are really changing the strategy of the whole thing a lot, right? Because if you look in more detail, what actually does it mean to make a personal mobile device and make information really easily available for personal mobile devices? You see it's actually not too easy, right? You should go to the public app store. So have a native app, make this accessible via the public app store, have a branded app, because you have a lot of more of onboarding numbers and user engagement if the app is branded, a lot more trust by employees. Users shouldn't need to log in every day. So they should in for the initial login, but then it should just work as they know from all their other apps they have on their device. The app should have use cases that employees really care about. It shouldn't just be the central corporate use in there. It should be a lot more stuff in that really helps them in their day-to-day jobs. Personalization is a big thing. So it's a small screen, it's a small device. It should be automatically personalized based on my user profile. I want to see content that's related to me, to my location, to my business unit, to my job profile, and so on. And finally, something that only is available with native apps, I want to have push messages, right? So I want to really get notified if important things are happening. And we see at our customer that's a great activation taking place if you send out a news with a push message. So our customers see 3 times more readers of these news if the news is pushed out. And all this together means that mobile, easy access to mobile is really hard to achieve. And this also means that intranets today that try to do this with a responsive approach. So just take the intranet, just make it responsive, let users type in a URL on their mobile, and then they have to log in every time they want to use it on their private device. It doesn't work. We don't know a single case where a responsive intranet works well for mobile devices. There's no single case that I know. If you know of some of these cases, please let me know. I would be happy to see it. It's just not working, right? And this really means that there will be not 10 employee apps there, right? Employees will have the one app, which is kind of the front door intranet, the front door into the digital workplace. And this app will be on the public app store, it will be branded, and will have all the other things that you see on the left-hand side here. That's really important to understand. And this also means for bring your own device. So if you really want to have use cases and really have content on private devices of your employees, you need to think in this category and really say, these use cases, especially around communication, knowledge, and processes, they need to be available for private mobile devices. And all the other use cases will only be available on company devices. And if you think that through, that's really changing a lot the strategy around the digital workplace, because it's pretty hard to do that in the first place. I will show you the approach in the next slide, right? One thing before I turn over, one thing to keep in mind, the communication part is here in a lot more detail than the other parts, because we just wanted to show a lot of example use cases here. In real life, this would mean, let's say 95% of the content would still be only available within the company network on company devices, and maybe 5 or 10% would be available outside the company network on personal devices. So it's not we don't think it's a 50% share between the two, right? That's definitely misleading in the picture here. It just shows that a lot of use cases should and could be available on private mobile devices. Now, how does it look like on a technology stack? How could this be built up? The central point is that for a future digital workplace, there will be a part of the workplace that is available on private mobile devices, at least if you want to include non-desk employees into the game, right? So that's really important to understand. And this means from our perspective, this will not be just an employee app outside of the whole thing, but this is the front door intranet. This is the main communication hub that is available on private devices, but also on company devices. It's available on mobile and it's available on desktop. That's the main entry door into all the other services that are around for the digital workplace, right? So that's the area up here. And you could argue, hey, you told us about best of breed, and why does it include some of different use cases from communication and knowledge and processes? It's just because what I talked about a couple of minutes ago, it's really hard to organize access up there, right? To have it in the App Store, to have it branded and so on. That's why we see a clear trend to have more use cases in this front door intranet and communication hub. With inside the company is a lot easier to rely on individual ready-made services, right? And if you look at here as an example on collaboration, you see 5 years ago, we would have said collaboration is just SharePoint or it's just Jive or IBM Connections, whatever. Now we see a lot more individual specialized tools like SharePoint, like Confluence from Atlassian, like all these team chats like Slack, Teams from Microsoft or Stride from Atlassian. You have the communities and networking part, which is Yammer and Workplace by Facebook. Email still, of course, a huge topic here, right? But what you see here, it's really best of breed, ready-made individual solutions for specific use cases that are all available via single sign-on, right? Staffbase is also available via single sign-on. So the login authentication, all of this is taken care of, and the user enters the workplace through the communication hub and then jumps into the service that he or she really wants to use. So that, as an example, one really interesting discussion that's often coming up in that sense is around communication, and especially the question, I have Slack. Why can't I use Slack as an internal communications tool? Why do I need an intranet? Why can't I use Yammer as an internal communications tool? The answer to this is you have different sizes of audiences, right? So starting with teams, communities, and company-wide and targeted audiences, you have entirely different requirements in terms of communication with them. And this means, especially if we look to the company-wide use cases, There is a lot of governance around this. So company-wide is really important, especially for mobile, that you don't send out 10 push notifications every day if anything new happens. So you need a lot more governance around notifications there. You need a lot more governance about what's actually visible on the homepage. You need control about the homepage, and you want to have certain important notifications that are there and that they will stay there for a couple of days even, and not just a couple of minutes as it happens in Slack or even Yammer today, right? Workplace by Facebook, for instance, allows you to pin certain news to the top, but just one. So if I pin the next one, the one that I pinned before will just go down in some sort of the stream. But for instance, Workplace doesn't allow you to change a post, like a picture on a post, if I want to change it for some reason, right? If I send out a post to 10,000 employees, I have already 100 comments, and somebody tells me the picture is wrong on this one. I can't change the picture. I just need to delete the full post with all the comments, right? So you see in quite some details, for instance, Yammer doesn't allow to pin anything to the top. In quite of the details, it shows that these tools are not really great for company-wide and large audiences, but they are great for communities. And for teams, we see a clear trend to the group chat applications like Slack and Teams that really have taken over the space there. And it makes a lot of sense to really think, who do you want to reach and what's the best tool actually to do that. In summary, when we talk about an employee app as a communication hub and the front door intranet, here's an example how this can look like. This means it's an entry door. It's an entry door that does a lot around communication and these use cases, some knowledge, some employee-related processes, as you see here, for instance, also KPI communications as an example. It can be different from mobile and desktop, right? So on mobile, in this example, we would say the links to SharePoint, Teams, and Yammer are not visible on mobile because I don't need them there. They are just there on the desktop version. And this is like an entry door that I can use to actually then jump to Yammer or Teams or wherever I want to go with that. And that's available on private and company devices, and is really the front door into the intranet world, right? So that's the major vision we see here. And as an example, one of our customers, Viessmann, is 11,000 employees worldwide right now. They are using this in some of their markets, 7,200 users now. They have used Staffbase as an employee communications app for nearly 1.5 years now. And based on that, they decided now to go to step and say, this is our front door intranet now. And we even developed this further from a communication hub to an employee experience platform. And exactly as I showed you in the technology overview slide, that's exactly how they will set this up. So it's a combination of communication, of knowledge, and processes as part of this application. One important fact that's coming into play here is whenever you think about the front door intranet and the communication hub, it's important that you can support quite some use cases, because it's communication is important. Knowledge, for knowledge, it makes a lot of sense to have, for instance, pages where you can have documentation, videos, pictures, documents that you where you can also build up a structure where you can target pages like safety instruction to specific audiences and so on. So what you see here is a backend of the Staffbase of the Staffbase content management system, and you see here all the plugins that we offer right now and that you can use to actually provide these use cases to users and to specific audiences of the users. Summing this up, This means the digital workplace today and the major strategic role it plays in companies today is really to support organizations to manage change. And that's why, keep in mind, communication and collaboration are really top priorities today. That's really a change compared to 5 years ago. Um, the second important part I wanted to make and point I wanted to make is if you want to reach employees on their private mobile devices, it really requires entirely new approach. And this means mobile can't just be a feature on your feature list. It requires an entirely new strategy for your digital workplace, right? Communication as a process is, especially if you do it company-wide, especially if you do it to specific audiences, has a couple of pretty high demands in terms of accessibility, personalization, editing control. This means it's nothing you can just do with, hey, we set up a blog and we do some company news there. If you think this through for a large distributed organization with many locations, many languages, it's something you really have to have a really good functionality for. Tools like Yammer and Workplace Facebook are not the right choice in that regard. And that's exactly where we position Staffbase here. And the last, and I think the most important point that I want to make today, an employee app is not just an app. It's really only effective if you think of this as a communication hub and the front door intranet. And this really means it's a built-in content management system. It's also great on desktop, and it's a built communication intranet. It's not just a mobile application. And if you think of it that way, all parts fall into the right order pretty nicely, and you see this as from our perspective, great perspective for digital workplaces. Very flexible, very good availability for all user profiles within the company, and very easy to really develop further. That's all I wanted to share today about digital workplace and how this relates to employee apps. At this point, again, keep in mind, we are happy to share the recording and also the slides with you. I am happy to take any questions now from you guys. Other than that, at this point already, thanks a lot for tuning in to the webinar.